Hi, folks. We're Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the issue of rent control. I think it's a hugely misunderstood topic, and the causes of rent increases and the ability to cause rent stabilisation or to bring rentals down is similarly, in my view, misunderstood. So now, what's brought this up, I guess, is a major talking point at the moment is that the socialist mayor of or candidate for mayor of Minneapolis is talking about various, rent controls, building more houses, that sort of thing, and also the mayor of New York, or the mayor. The election's yet to take place, but that Mamdani dude is talking about rent controls as well to bring rents down. Now, what both of these people are saying, and both of them are born elsewhere in some third world shithole, but what both of them are saying is rents are just way too high. They're out of control, and we need to do something about it. So you can't argue with that. That is a bald-faced fact. No disputing that. Rents are out of control. This is all across the Western world. Why are rents out of control across the Western world? Because of mass migration. And to illustrate, that Australia has increased its population by something like 35% in just over 25 years. And that's all from mass migration. So millions of people, mainly from like India and China but other third world countries are streaming into Australia, and with a very low bar of requirements. Most of them don't speak a lick of English. They haven't got any qualifications or work experience. They're just fucking third world shithole, illiterate, low IQ, a lot of health issues, peasants that are coming in. There are train loads of them around the city. When I go in there and downtown Sydney, and you see all these midgets that, again, they're not even 5 foot tall, and they're like the Morlocks in that H.G. Wells novel, The Time Machine, and they're coming in, and they all seen in summer. You can see they've all. I mean, nearly all of them have had rickets as children. They're going to have serious medical needs in the future. All is going to be paid for by the Australian taxpayer, and they all work at, or nearly all of them anyway, work at these takeout food jobs and that sort of thing. So they've been imported as an illiterate. They're illiterate in their own language in peasant class, but they still have to live somewhere. Now, they may live 20 to a room or 20 to a two-bedroom apartment or something, but they're still taking up a lot of real estate, and the prices are being artificially inflated because of that. There are no natural market forces here at work at all. This is all contrived and all forced and all force-fed, equivalent of putting your finger on the scales. Now, the real estate sector and the finance sector, they love this, and they have a lot of influence over the government. And since mass migration began and real estate speculation in residential real estate became an issue, there's hardly a government employee who isn't engaging in insider trading type real estate speculation. Some are getting quite rich off it. So what's the primary cause of runaway rents is mass migration, but there are some other causes, and I've mentioned this in another video, which we need to look at. And one of the key things here is real estate flipping. Every time a property, rental property is sold at the highest current market price, because remember, rents aren't the only thing going up, real estate prices are going up. Houses that 25 years ago you could have bought for 400,000 are now, selling for 2.7, 2.8 million. That's how insane the price is. But if someone buys that property at the latest price, the most recent market, artificially inflated market price, but a market price nonetheless, and they rent that property, then they need to charge top dollar rent for it. So every time a property is flipped, a rental property is flipped, it causes the rent to go up because the person that bought the property may have, for example, may have paid $100 for the property. When they sell it, a couple of years, few years down the track, they can get $200 for it. Therefore, the rent has to effectively double. Now, also, given the shortage of real estate, this is not an issue of families. Can they afford to rent it, and is their income enough? The higher rental may get, and very often gets. I see people around here where there are 5 or 6 labourers, labour type people. They're not on high incomes. 5 or 6 labourers renting one place, and every room has got a bed or a mattress or something in it, or bunk beds or whatever. There's none of this. It's the mum and dad in this room and one kid each in the other 2 bedrooms. Those days for a lot of people, are completely gone. And so we need to, I think, understand the social implications of that working as well, or how that works. And as people are getting married later or not getting married at all, not having children, then we're looking at situations where housing is less and less for families and more for stacking as many illiterate peasant migrants into it as you possibly can. So real estate flipping to the highest, most recent price has an automatic upward and very severe upward effect on rentals. The other upward effect of rentals is that real estate, sleazy, low-life real estate agents who are, and some of these guys are sleazy beyond belief, but they openly want large groups of migrants, illiterate peasant migrants moving in. So they'll stack them 20 to a 2-bedroom apartment, because even though they may all work as food delivery drivers or toilet cleaners or I don't know, labourers or some shit job, they still have a combined income that would be much higher than just a single family wage earner that would typically be the sort of person that would rent the property. So because there's 20 people in there, and they say, look, this is highly illegal for 20 people to be living in this 2-bedroom apartment, but because we're going to look the other way here, we're going to not tell the government what you're doing, and so you 20 guys can live it, but we're just going to have to stick you for higher rent. So the rent that say maybe, for example, $500 a week, they'll be sticking these guys, these 20 third world peasants, they'll be sticking them $800 a week. And the real estate gets more money, the owner of the property gets more money, and so kind of everyone's happy, and the illiterate peasants can live illegally, because you're not meant to have more than I think 5 people in a 2-bedroom apartment living there when there's 20, but everyone's just looking the other way. So that also has an upward effect on the rent, because the rent is then advertised. If those people move out or something happens, the rent's then advertised at what it was last time, $850 a week, for a property that really is only worth $450, $500 in the real world. But this is not the real world. So that's another aspect of mass migration and the sleaze that inevitably accompanies these sorts of things. So these are the now just sort of on top of that, there's a whole machine in rental property information guidance where they pop out. There are these data analytics companies, call it what you like, in the real estate space, and they send out these weekly or monthly newsletters. Say, hey, your property, it's worth another $5 a week in rental. Our examination of the average rental price in your area states, and so you can get more money. You should increase the rent of your. So there's an updraft effect there that's constantly looming. It's a lot of misinformation, and I would call it market rigging in effect. Now we can add other things in there, like the amount of properties that BlackRock is buying and sitting on and so on. And just to illustrate how non-market driven things are, certainly what I've noticed is that property owners are prepared to leave the property, rental property, like they're advertising for rental renters. They're prepared to leave the property unoccupied for months if necessary without dropping the rent. Now, in a market-driven circumstances, you don't do that. If you can't, and this is how it used to be when I was a kid or a younger guy, whenever you can't get a renter in the property, you lower the price. You keep on lowering the price till you can get someone to rent the fucking property. That's what you do. That's how market forces work. So if you want $100 a week, you can't get it. You'll just keep on dropping it every few weeks. You'll drop it by $5, and then $80. And yep, I'll rent that. And bingo, you've got your rental. That's how it works in market-driven circumstances. But these are not market-driven circumstances. Far from it. So people like I've seen properties that are left vacant, but they're advertised for rent, and they'll be up there for 6 months or longer. Again, that doesn't happen in market driven. Same for property sales. I've bought plenty of properties in my lifetime, and if you buy one and sell another, or you're selling one but you're buying one, and you've got to get bridging finance because you're effectively carrying two mortgages, as you bridge across from one to the other until your first property gets sold. So you're very motivated to sell the property, very motivated. And because you don't want to carry two mortgages. But in that, so if you can't get, say you want, again, $100, someone comes along and says, look, I'll give you 93. And you do your sums and you look at the arithmetic, and okay, got to carry two mortgages. I've got penalty fees coming in here if I don't, deal with that bridging loan in time. The interest goes up. I've got to accept the 93. I wanted 100K, but I'm going to have to accept the 93 because I got to clear one of these two mortgages. So you do that, but that's market driven. Now today that doesn't happen. There's a guy, again, not far down the road. I know him. Well, more just to say hello to, but he wants like $1.5 million for his property, but he doesn't have to sell it. He can sit on it for as long as he feels like it, and he's had that for sale for a long time now. He's not getting even a nibble, let alone a bite on that. Not at that price. It's quite overpriced for what he wants. But the real estate and everybody's saying, no, stay with it. But the reality is, as I spoke to him, he doesn't need the money. He's inherited a property, and him and his wife have inherited a property each within quite a close sort of time window. So he doesn't need the money, so he can afford to sit on it. So a lot of the people that are selling property now, they don't need the money. They're not having to buy another property or have to have bridging finance, which is how it used to be. So that's short-circuited what a natural market force is. So they say, well, I want $1.5 million. If I have to leave it on the market for a whole year longer, I'll do it until I just get bored with it, and then maybe I'll sell. But for economic reasons, market economics, they're not being driven by. So this too is a big issue, and one that has gone, I think, unrecognised or insufficiently recognised as part of the wider situation in terms of real estate selling here. So there was again this is a lady, and she'd inherited the property, but she wanted top dollar for the property, and she had it sold for just on 9 months, and it was bought by other people who had also had an inheritance, so they weren't having to buy it from their own income or having to juggle multiple loans and so on. So this dynamic of people being able to sit indefinitely on a property, whether it be for rent or whether it be for sale, to get the money they want, that's a very changed thing. As a kid, it was never like that, or a young man, it was never like that. And people had to sell. They were compelled to sell because they needed the money to do something else, or again to avoid a bridging loan, or they need the rental income to offset against the payments. That doesn't appear to exist anymore. So how can rents be brought down then? Well, statistically, if you've got somewhere in the region of between 45 and 50 new dwellings being built per 1,000 of population, that's roughly the stat. It can vary a little bit, for example, in a rural location versus a very urban location, but also there are other things that affect that. For example, there's a new estate. It's not that far from where it's probably 30 minutes drive on the freeway, but there's a new estate being done where there's a couple of hundred houses, but the rents there are quite good, but it's probably a 25-minute drive to the nearest train station, and um, the nearest bus station is probably 2,000 meters away. So it's not a long, arduous walk, but it's and the buses are only running like once an hour in the morning and in the evening, but once every 2 or 3 hours, I think, is during the day. So public transport's pretty ordinary. So you must have a car, possibly two cars, given it's not in a downtown area. You know, if you want to get to the shops, if one person's taking the car to get to work, which you would need to, then the other person would need to have a car. You know, the public transport just isn't good enough. So that sort of thing. So the rents are lower there, but then the infrastructure services aren't there. You know, it's half an hour drive to the nearest doctor's, you know, the medical center, you know, these sort of things. So you know, having lower rents in areas where there's no services, I'm not sure that's really a value for money type proposition there. But there's a few things needed. Firstly, the flipping of property, the flipping of investment property, and then the rent has to double because the person's paying high. We're in new territory here. The price of real estate, you know, doubling every couple of years or something. That's new. That this is a unique period in human history caused by mass migration, of course. But this means that property flipping can be very profitable where it didn't used to be. Certainly nowhere near this level of profitability. And that has, you know, the upward effect, as I mentioned, on rents. So control of flipping, if you've got a property that's being rented, you can't flip it for any more than you paid for it, or some small premium. But you can't play the flipping game with rental property. And if you want to be an investor and have investment property and rental, then you just can't do the flipping. It's just not how it works. That needs to be implemented. Also, on the other side, a lot of people say, well, as soon as you got rent control, landlord, you know, property owners, they won't invest in, you know, maintenance and basic upgrades and this sort of thing. So you've got, you know, 50-year-old toilets and 50-year-old kitchens and, you know, those sorts of things. Well, that can easily be dealt with special targeted write-downs and tax write-offs and incentives and so on. So through the taxation system, so that could be effortlessly dealt with rather than just relying on whether or not the property owner wants to you know, feels, I don't feel like upgrading that. Nah, if that toilet could be, you know, proper, so that you can't, you know, to me the property owner shouldn't be out of pocket, should not be out of pocket, but it should not be of passive wealth creation where just because you've got the money to buy investment properties and you can flip them every couple of years, that's not productive work and shouldn't be allowed or permitted to be such, or should be taxed so heavily that it's not worth the flipping and so on. But the idea is that if you've got an investment rental property, you can't flip it and increase the rent. And so the only way you can do that is to prevent it from being sold at the new current artificial market price. So these are some of the things that can be done, and they will be very, very effective, in my view, very effective in stopping the rent. Now the issue is, okay, rent's going up at 3 times the rate of wages. That needs to be stopped. You know, that means people's standard of living is being torn to pieces. You know, 65% of the average wage is being chewed up in rent these days, certainly in Sydney. So how can we address that? Now, some people say, well, all you got to do is build more property. Yeah, all right then, okay. But to actually have an appreciable effect on rent, given the rate of mass migration, you could stop mass migration. That would solve the problem. But given the rate of mass migration, you need something in order of 60 to 70 properties. This is 2-bedroom minimum, 60 to 70 properties per year per 1,000 of population. Now, I don't think there's a single country or place or city in the world that's getting anywhere near that. And that would have an effect. But that's the level, that's the level of commitment and energy and effort that's required to actually address it. But the real issue, stop mass migration and deport the people who are here as parasites. That would fix it overnight. But I don't think there's any political will to do that. You've been a Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.